Why 2025 is a turning point for migrants. 2025 marks one of the most transformative years in the history of UK immigration policy. For decades, the United Kingdom has stood as a symbol of opportunity, a country that attracted some of the world's best minds, brightest students, and most skilled professionals. People from Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East saw the UK not just as a land of education and employment, but as a place to start families and build futures. However, in early 2025, a sudden political announcement shook this foundation. The British government declared major restrictions on dependent visas, effectively ending the right of thousands of students and workers to bring their families. The reform has become known internationally as the UK 2025 dependent visa ban. Why does this matter? Because for millions of migrants, family unity is the heart of migration. When a student or skilled worker moves abroad, they often do so with the dream of sharing their success with their spouse, partner, or children. But now, many will have to make a painful choice between career and family. The decision has sparked global debate. Supporters argue it will control population pressure and protect local jobs, while critics see it as a politically motivated policy that threatens the UK's global reputation as a fair, inclusive, and diverse nation. What is the UK dependent visa? To understand this issue, we must first understand what a dependent visa is and why it mattered so much. A UK dependent visa allowed the family members, usually the spouse, civil partner, or children under 18, of a main visa holder to accompany them in the UK. It applied to two major groups: students, especially postgraduate or PhD students, skilled workers, holding Tier 2 or skilled worker visas. Dependents could live legally in the UK during the main applicant stay study or work under specific permissions, access healthcare through the NHS, after paying the immigration health surcharge, contribute to the local economy and culture. This visa represented family stability for thousands of migrants. For example, a PhD student from India could bring their spouse, who might take a part-time job, while their children enrolled in British schools. Similarly, a nurse working in the NHS could bring her husband and kids to settle in a small town. But by 2023, the UK's net migration hit a record 745,000 people, creating massive political backlash. The media framed dependents as hidden migration inflators. Soon after, the Home Office began signalling reforms, and by mid-2025, the full ban took effect for many categories. The 2025 policy, detailed explanation of every major change. The 2025 reform is not a single rule. It's a complete restructuring of the dependent visa system. Here's what it includes. Graduation cap for international students. Only PhD and research-based postgraduate students can bring dependents. Masters and undergraduate students are no longer eligible to sponsor family members. The rule applies to new visa applications starting January 2025. No exceptions for students with offers before the date. Dependents already in the UK will not be deported, but they cannot renew under new restrictions. The minimum salary requirement to bring dependents has risen from £26,200 to £38,700. Care workers, health aides, and junior-level roles are excluded from family sponsorship. Dependents of skilled workers must now provide proof of financial self-sufficiency. A minimum bank balance threshold is required before approval. For temporary and seasonal workers, all dependent sponsorships are completely banned. These categories are considered short-term labour migration with no settlement pathway. In essence, the UK government has drawn a hard line between essential and non-essential migration, but critics argue this distinction ignores the human side of migration entirely. Who is affected? Students, workers, and families. This policy directly affects three groups. Graduation cap 1. International students from countries like India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka are the most impacted. In 2023-24, around 153,000 dependents came with international students. Now that number is expected to drop by 80%. These students often rely on emotional and financial support from their families. Without dependents, many will find it difficult to balance childcare, study, and part-time work. Universities, especially in smaller cities like Leicester, Coventry, and Glasgow, have reported sharp drops in international applications. Briefcase 2. Skilled workers. The ban affects the healthcare sector the most. Overseas nurses, doctors, and caregivers, once called frontline heroes, are now unable to reunite with their families. This has created moral outrage and recruitment challenges for the NHS, which already faces severe staff shortages. A nurse from Kenya summed it up: "We helped Britain during the pandemic. Now Britain tells us our families are not welcome." Family Man Woman Girl 3. Families and dependents. Thousands of spouses and children are separated, forced to live apart for years. This emotional cost is immeasurable. Families divided across continents, parents missing birthdays, children growing up without one parent. Why the ban was introduced. The real motives. When the UK government announced the dependent visa restrictions in early 2025, it was presented as a matter of national interest. Officials claimed the reforms were essential to control migration, protect public services, and ensure the system remained fair to British citizens. But when we look beyond the press releases, the real motives behind the 2025 ban are far more complex, involving politics, economics, and public perception. Political timing and election strategy. The UK was heading toward a politically charged year. Public frustration over housing shortages, rising rents, and cost of living pressures gave politicians an easy scapegoat: immigration numbers. Migration had reached record levels, over 745,000 in net migration for 2023, according to the UK's Office for National Statistics. This number became a talking point in Parliament and on national television. So, as the 2025 elections approached, the ruling government needed to show it was taking tough action. Cutting dependent visas was a strategic move. It directly reduced visible migration numbers while avoiding backlash from big business and universities, which depend on migrants for labour and tuition fees. Politically, it was a way to tell the public, we are in control again. Economic pressures and the cost of living crisis. Britain's economy, though stable, was under heavy strain in the post-pandemic years. Inflation had hit hard. Rent prices were skyrocketing in London, Birmingham, and Manchester. The National Health Service was struggling to provide services, and local councils were facing budget shortfalls. Many in the public began to believe that migrants and their dependents were adding pressure to these already stressed systems, from healthcare and housing to schools. Government ministers argued that dependents do not contribute to the economy at the same level as the main visa holder. However, economists disagree. Migrants, including dependents, pay taxes, rent homes, shop locally, and fill skill gaps. The government's reasoning appeared more about optics than actual financial strain. Still, for officials, the move looked economically responsible, a message of protecting British taxpayers at a time of fiscal difficulty. Public sentiment and media narrative. Another powerful motive lies in public emotion and media influence. For years, British tabloids and political commentators have amplified a narrative that the UK was too full or losing control of its borders. Photos of migrants lining up at visa centres or stories of large families arriving with students made headlines almost weekly in 2023 to 24. Instead of focusing on the contributions migrants made, the conversation turned toward numbers, how many people were coming, rather than what they were bringing to the country. By banning dependents, the government appeased public sentiment and reclaimed the political narrative. It sent a message that Britain was prioritising locals first, even if the policy itself didn't fully solve the underlying economic or social issues. Pressure on public infrastructure. Hospitals, schools, and housing markets were indeed under pressure, but largely due to underfunding and austerity, not migrants themselves. Still, by limiting dependents, the government claimed it could reduce immediate population growth in smaller towns where international students tend to live, like Coventry, Bradford, and Nottingham. This reasoning found traction among voters frustrated with long hospital wait times and overcrowded schools, giving the policy a layer of public legitimacy. A political signal, not a sustainable solution. Ultimately, this policy was as much symbolic as it was practical. It showed control, but at the expense of compassion. It satisfied headlines, but hurt universities and families. And while it may have won short-term political points, Analysts warn it could damage the UK's global reputation as a welcoming hub for talent and innovation. Impact on international students. Now that we understand the motives, let's turn to who is most affected: the international students who form the backbone of the UK's education economy. Drop in admissions and global confidence. International students contribute more than £42 billion per year to the UK economy through tuition, accommodation, and daily living expenses. However, the 2025 dependent visa ban has shaken confidence among prospective students, particularly from countries like India, Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, which together represent a large percentage of the UK's postgraduate population. Before 2025, students viewed the UK as a family-friendly destination, a place where they could study while keeping their families close. Now, many are turning to Canada, Australia, or Germany, where dependents are still allowed to live and work. Universities across the UK, from Coventry and De Montfort to Glasgow and UWE Bristol, have already reported a 15 to 30% decline in postgraduate enrolments. Briefcase 2. Economic strain on students. The financial burden has increased dramatically. With dependents banned, married students must now maintain 2 households, one in the UK and another back home. This means double rent, double bills, and emotional stress. Many students also relied on their spouse's income to manage living costs in high-expense cities like London. Without that support, budgeting becomes difficult. Some students are now working longer part-time hours, potentially risking academic performance, while others drop out or defer their courses entirely. Emotional and psychological impact. Perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence is the emotional toll. Imagine a mother studying for her master's in public health while her 3-year-old child grows up thousands of miles away. Or a husband in London missing his wife's pregnancy milestones back home. These are not hypothetical stories. They are happening right now. Counselors at universities have reported a surge in loneliness, anxiety, and depression among international students who are forced to leave families behind due to the new rules. For many, the dream of studying in the UK has turned into an experience of isolation and homesickness. Institutional challenges for universities. Universities are facing significant knock-on effects. Reduced international admissions mean loss of revenue, forcing institutions to cut scholarships and support programs. Smaller towns dependent on student spending are seeing slower local economies, empty rentals, lower sales in cafes, and fewer part-time job opportunities. Universities are lobbying the government to reconsider the policy, warning that the UK could lose its competitive position against Canada and Australia. Some institutions have even started offering virtual postgraduate courses to retain foreign interest, but it's not a sustainable alternative to in-person study. Shift in migration destinations. The visa ban has sparked a massive redirection of migration flows. Canada and Germany have positioned themselves as family-friendly study destinations, offering open work permits for spouses and easier schooling options for children. Australia, despite its own reforms, still allows dependents for master's students, making it a prime alternative for many who previously chose the UK. As a result, experts predict the UK's global student market share could fall significantly in 2025 to 2026, a blow to both its economy and soft power influence. The human story behind the numbers. Behind every statistic lies a personal struggle. A student from Lahore, Pakistan, told BBC Urdu, "I wanted my wife to join me while I study in London. Now I'll finish my degree alone, and maybe move to Canada after." Another from Nigeria said, "It feels like they welcomed our money, not our families." These testimonies echo across continents, feelings of disappointment, betrayal, and disillusionment toward a country once known for fairness and inclusivity. The UK's reputation as a global education hub depends not only on its universities but also on its immigration friendliness. Policies like the dependent visa ban risk painting Britain as increasingly restrictive and unwelcoming. In the global race for talent, perception matters. When families feel excluded, students choose other destinations. And when students leave, so do future innovators, entrepreneurs, and ambassadors who once proudly carried British degrees across the world. In the short term, this ban might help the UK lower migration numbers. But in the long term, it threatens something far greater: the trust, goodwill, and connection between Britain and the global student community. Impact on skilled workers and families. When we talk about the 2025 UK visa ban, most people think only of students, but the ripple effect goes much further. It deeply affects skilled professionals, healthcare workers, tech experts, and the families who form the heart of Britain's migrant workforce. Skilled workers, the backbone of the UK economy. The UK's modern economy runs on international talent. From doctors in the NHS to engineers in construction and developers in fintech, migrants fill essential roles that keep the country running. According to Home Office data, over 45% of new NHS recruits in 2024 were foreign-born. Many of these workers came under the skilled worker visa, often bringing their families to settle temporarily while they serve in hospitals, care homes, or IT firms. But with dependent restrictions and uncertainty spreading after the student visa reforms, even skilled professionals are feeling insecure. There's fear that the next policy shift could affect them too, limiting dependence, increasing income thresholds, or shortening visa durations. The psychological effect is massive. Skilled workers who once viewed the UK as a stable destination now see it as a risky investment in their future. Emotional toll on migrant families. The new visa environment has emotionally fractured many families. Imagine a nurse from Kenya working night shifts in Manchester, while her 2 children remain in Nairobi because dependent permissions were denied. Or an Indian software engineer in London who can't bring his wife due to new maintenance fund rules. These are real stories, not just statistics. Families who once dreamed of building a life together in the UK are now living in separation, facing months or even years apart. Children are growing up without one parent, couples are managing long-distance marriages, and many are struggling with anxiety and depression. Mental health organizations have reported a rise in stress-related consultations among visa holders since 2024, linking it to separation anxiety and fear of deportation or non-renewal. Financial impact on skilled migrants. With family members unable to join them, workers often face higher living costs. Single living means paying more rent per person, while remittances back home continue. Without spousal support or shared income, even well-paid professionals are under pressure. Many employers are now noticing higher turnover rates, workers choosing Canada or Australia instead, where family policies are more welcoming. For example, in Canada, spouses of skilled workers get open work permits, allowing them to contribute economically. In the UK, the lack of similar flexibility creates financial strain and frustration. The family dream turned distant for decades. The UK marketed itself as a family-friendly destination, safe, multicultural, and stable. Migrants aspired to not only work but build a life there. The 2025 visa reforms shattered that narrative. Many now feel betrayed. A Pakistani doctor interviewed by The Guardian said, "I came to serve in the NHS. Now I'm treated like a temporary guest, not a human being with a family." That's the painful truth. People feel used, not valued. Shift toward alternative destinations. Countries like Germany, Ireland, and Canada have seized the opportunity. They're launching campaigns highlighting their family-friendly immigration pathways. Recruitment agencies report a 30 to 40% increase in skilled worker interest toward these nations since early 2025. The message is clear. When families can't stay together, talent goes elsewhere. And for the UK, this could mean losing the very people who keep its hospitals, schools, and tech industries alive. Heavy Black Heart #6. Human stories that speak louder than policy. Every separated family tells a story. A story of sacrifice, longing, and hope, crushed under political decisions. One nurse said, "I save British lives every day, but I can't bring my own child here. It's heartbreaking." The policy, meant to reduce numbers, has instead reduced trust between Britain and the migrants who once called it a second home. The impact on skilled workers and their families isn't just professional, it's personal. It's about humanity, connection, and belonging. And as the UK tightens its rules, it risks losing not just workers, but the very soul of its multicultural identity. Economic and social implications beyond personal and emotional consequences. The economic and social costs of the 2025 visa ban are enormous, and perhaps underestimated. The dependent visa restrictions, while politically popular, could harm the UK's economy, education system, and global competitiveness in ways that will unfold slowly but painfully. Chart with downward trend 1. Immediate economic impact. The first signs were visible within months. Universities, rental businesses, local shops, and even transportation networks began to feel the decline in spending from international families. Dependent family members aren't just extra people, they're consumers, taxpayers, and contributors to local economies. In towns like Coventry, Leicester, and Glasgow, heavily dependent on student and migrant populations, shopkeepers reported up to 25% lower sales since early 2025. Estate agents noticed rising vacancies in family-sized flats once rented by international students with dependents. Lost to the education sector. The UK education industry contributes more than £40 billion annually, and dependents play a crucial role in that ecosystem. When families come together, they stabilise students, help them succeed academically, and create community. Without dependents, dropout rates may rise, especially among mature students or married postgraduates. Universities fear that fewer students from Asia and Africa, key markets for international enrollment, could lead to a multi-billion-pound revenue loss. Some institutions have already started cutting scholarships and staff due to reduced overseas intake. 3. Reduced workforce diversity. Dependent visa holders often work part-time, fill shortages in childcare, retail, or healthcare, sectors that constantly face labour gaps. By removing them, the UK has unintentionally reduced its flexible workforce pool. This means employers now face higher recruitment costs, slower hiring, and even operational gaps in essential services. Pound 4. Inflationary and social effects. When migration numbers drop sharply, the demand for housing and consumer goods changes too. While this can slightly lower rent pressure in some regions, it also slows down economic momentum. Fewer consumers means slower business turnover and a less dynamic economy. In the long term, this could even hurt small and medium-sized businesses that depend on migrant spending. Reputational damage to brand. Britain. The UK's global image has always been tied to openness, diversity, and opportunity. The 2025 visa policies are changing that perception. When international media headlines read "UK closes doors to families" or "Dependent ban hits global students," it sends a chilling message to future migrants, investors, and talent. In contrast, Canada and Australia are gaining reputational capital as inclusive destinations, positioning themselves as the new UK for global migrants. Economists warn that the visa ban might achieve the short-term goal of lowering migration numbers, but it will slow long-term growth. Migrants contribute significantly to innovation, entrepreneurship, and tax revenue. Fewer international families mean lower consumer spending. Fewer startups founded by migrant couples. Reduced future citizens contributing to pensions and taxes. In short, the UK might save politically, but lose economically. Social fragmentation and cultural impact. There's also a deep social cost. Migrants bring cultural diversity, food, art, languages, festivals, and ideas. By discouraging family migration, the UK risks shrinking its multicultural landscape, making communities less vibrant and inclusive. Local schools once rich in global diversity may see fewer international children. Neighbourhoods that thrived on multicultural bonds could grow quieter, more divided, and less dynamic. Scales. #8. The irony of the policy. What's deeply ironic is that Britain's ageing population and worker shortages actually demand more immigration, not less. Yet, political fear has overridden economic logic. A 2025 think tank report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimated that restricting dependents could cost the UK economy nearly £8 billion annually in lost growth and productivity. Economists, university heads, and business leaders have voiced similar concerns. The CEO of Universities UK said, "These policies damage our competitiveness and moral credibility." A prominent economist at the London School of Economics noted, "The dependent visa restrictions are a political fix, not an economic solution." The consensus is clear. The UK's approach risks long-term harm for short-term gain. The 2025 visa ban was introduced in the name of control, but its effects are spreading far beyond borders and numbers. It's reshaping lives, economies, and perceptions. Every migrant who leaves the UK takes with them more than their skills. They take their dreams, creativity, and connection to Britain. And in a world built on global collaboration, that's a loss no country can afford. Global reactions and comparisons. The UK's 2025 visa ban didn't happen in isolation. It sent ripples across the world. From government offices in Ottawa to university campuses in Delhi and Lagos, this policy became the subject of intense debate, concern, and comparison. So, how did the rest of the world react? And how do the UK's new restrictions stack up against other major destinations like Canada, Australia, and the US? Let's break it down step by step. Globe showing Europe-Africa 1. Shock and concern among migrant communities when the news broke that the UK was severely restricting or effectively banning dependent visas for certain categories, particularly students. Social media exploded. Thousands of students took to platforms like Twitter, X, TikTok, and YouTube to express shock, frustration, and heartbreak. Hashtags like hashtag UK visa ban 2025, hashtag family separated, and hashtag study in Canada instead began trending globally within days. One Pakistani student posted, "I just got my admission letter. But without my wife, what's the point? I can't leave her behind for 2 years." This emotional reaction was mirrored by professionals, journalists, and even policymakers who saw the move as a step backward for a nation that once championed global inclusivity. Canadian 2. Canada's welcoming contrast. While the UK was tightening its rules, Canada took the opposite route. The Canadian government announced more flexible family visa options and introduced pilot programs allowing spouses of students and skilled workers to gain open work permits. The result? A massive surge in interest toward Canada. According to a 2025 survey by IDP Education, 47% of students who dropped the UK as a destination listed Canada as their new first choice. Canada's immigration minister even commented, subtly but clearly, "We believe strong families build strong communities. That's why dependents are not a problem. They're part of the solution." This contrast highlighted how policy direction defines global appeal. Canada positioned itself as the friendly, progressive alternative to the UK. Australian 3. Australia's balanced but cautious approach. Australia's student and dependent policies also underwent reform in 2025, but with more balance and empathy than Britain's. While they introduced tighter checks on non-genuine applicants, they kept dependent rights intact, recognizing that family stability improves academic success and worker retention. Australian officials noted that Britain's ban could send tens of thousands of potential migrants south to Australia. And early data proved them right. By late 2025, Australian universities saw a 20% increase in postgraduate applications from countries like India, Bangladesh, and Nigeria, students who previously aimed for the UK. United States 4. The US stance, stability amid tight controls. The United States, while strict on visa approvals, maintained a consistent policy toward dependence of F1 students and H1B workers. Unlike the UK, there was no sudden ban or moral panic. The system remained tough but predictable. Many experts praised the US for policy consistency, something migrants value. Students said they'd rather deal with tough but clear US rules than friendly today, restrictive tomorrow UK policies. In the global competition for talent, predictability is power, and the US quietly benefited from Britain's missteps. Globe with Asia. Australia 5. Asian and African governments react. Countries like India, Nigeria, and Pakistan, which send large numbers of students and workers to the UK, officially raised the issue in diplomatic circles. Several education ministries sought clarity and assurances that ongoing students wouldn't face retroactive restrictions. Nigeria's education minister openly criticized the policy. The UK's new stance undermines the dreams of thousands of families who see education as their bridge to a better life. Indian media outlets ran continuous coverage of affected students stranded without their dependents, calling the situation a humanitarian oversight in the name of policy. The ripple effect was political as well as emotional. Global governments began reassessing their bilateral education and migration ties with Britain. Classical building #6. Universities and business leaders respond. British universities, already under financial pressure, became vocal critics of the policy. They warned that the UK was risking its £40 billion international education sector, one of its biggest export industries. Vice-chancellors wrote open letters to the government, urging reconsideration, while think tanks like Universities UK and the Migration Observatory published data showing how family bans reduce enrolment and student satisfaction. The Confederation of British Industry, CBI, echoed the sentiment. Restricting family visas for skilled professionals and students sends the wrong message, that Britain is closed for business. Briefcase 7. The media's global framing international headlines framed the issue starkly. Britain shuts the door on migrant families. The Washington Post UK's education dream turning into a nightmare for students. The Times of India visa ban shakes trust in British openness. Al Jazeera public perception shifted fast. What once was study in the UK became study elsewhere. The UK is uncertain. This reputational loss may take years to rebuild. 8. Comparative Summary Country-Dependent Visa Policy, 2025. Public perception effect on migration flow. United Kingdom UK restrictive and near ban negative. Closed major decline in interest. Canada welcoming. Work rights for dependents positive. Family-friendly strong increase. Australia moderate. Balanced stable moderate increase. United States USA strict, but predictable neutral steady flow. Germany expanding skilled family visas positive growing migration interest. In global terms, the UK went from being the leader in education migration to a country seen as unpredictable and restrictive. What the world learned. The 2025 UK visa ban served as a case study in how immigration policy affects national reputation. The lesson? When politics overtakes practicality, a nation loses credibility faster than it can rebuild it. In trying to look tough domestically, Britain appeared unwelcoming internationally, and the competition wasted no time capitalizing on that. As we look beyond 2025, the question remains, what happens next? Will the UK reopen its doors to dependent families, or is this truly the end of the inclusive visa era? Let's explore the long-term predictions, future possibilities, and real advice for anyone planning to migrate, study, or work in Britain. In the immediate future, the UK is expected to maintain its restrictive stance. Political pressure to reduce net migration remains high, and leaders will use the dependent visa ban as a symbol of control. Students enrolling in late 2025 or early 2026 should not expect any relaxation soon. Instead, they should plan realistically, focusing on solo relocation, financial planning, and emotional readiness for temporary family separation. Experts predict that by 2027, the UK may begin to recalibrate its policy once economic strain and university lobbying reach their peak. If enrolment numbers continue to drop and skilled worker shortages worsen, the government will be forced to introduce controlled readmissions of dependents, perhaps under new financial or skill-based criteria. Universities are already negotiating with policymakers to offer family sponsorship quotas for high-performing postgraduate students, a potential middle ground between total ban and open policy. By the early 2030s, demography will tell the truth. Britain's aging population and shrinking domestic workforce will demand foreign talent again. When that time comes, the UK will likely reverse many of its 2025 restrictions, as economic necessity will outweigh political rhetoric. This has happened before. After every immigration crackdown in British history, there's been a rebound of openness driven by market demand. So the visa ban, while painful, may not be permanent, just a political phase. Electric light bulb 4. What migrants should do now. Here's some practical advice for students, workers, and families affected by the 2025 changes. Graduation cap for students. Choose your university carefully. Prefer those offering full post-study work rights. Budget for living alone initially, but stay updated on policy changes. Build community support groups of international students for emotional stability. Maintain a clean employment record and renew your visa early. Consider internal company transfers to more stable destinations like Canada or Ireland. Stay informed through official UK Home Office updates. Avoid misinformation on social media. Keep long-term documents, marriage certificates, children's records, ready for future dependent applications. Use virtual connections and international schooling options if separated. Advice for policy watchers for journalists, educators, and policymakers. Monitor the data, not the politics. Migration is not just about numbers. It's about people, communities, and the economy's future. The 2025 UK visa ban will either be remembered as a necessary correction or a historic miscalculation. Only time will tell. Let's end with perspective. Every policy has a human story behind it. Every visa number represents a dream, a father, a mother, a child hoping for a better tomorrow. The UK may have closed one door, but dreams don't end with one border. Global migration is shifting, and new opportunities are rising in Canada, Australia, Germany, and beyond. For those affected, don't lose hope. Adapt. Explore. Keep moving forward. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real-time updates on global visa, migration, and student policies. Comment below your thoughts. Should the UK bring back dependent visas? Let's raise awareness, together.